Hello, everyone. Don't know if it's an especially good idea to vlog about this, but, you know, fuck it. It's a coping mechanism and I could use one. It's 5-something a.m. And I've had, I guess if I'm lucky, I've had 3 or 4 hours of sleep in the last 24 hours. Nonetheless, it's 5-something a.m. and I am utterly sleepless. Exhausted, but utterly sleepless. I returned from the funeral some hours ago. And it was... I guess it was a good funeral? I say that with a question mark at the end because I don't have much to compare it to. I wouldn't know what to compare it to. But yeah, there were hymns, there was a lovely choir singer singing the hymns because pretty much nobody knows the damn words or even the melody to most of those things. She had a wonderful voice. I quite that. It was nice that my grandmother was sung to her rest by someone with a decent voice at least. That felt okay. My sister and her new baby were there. Stepsister, theoretically, but I don't really care about the distinction. And that helped a lot just to have, like, because when the priest is doing the somber, self-serious talking that is his job to do and stuff, for me, there's something wonderful about having a new life at a funeral. There's something about that feels right. A little baby who has no possible clue about what's going on, just kind of blah 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 in the background. That would have cheered my grandmother up a lot too, I think. So that was good. I am devoid of feeling right now. I mean I'm out of tears. That's probably like a couple of hours of my day as well has been spent with tears streaming down my face, and at some point you just run out. You have to recharge. The ability is on cooldown, as it were. So yeah. I've spent most of the past few days, I've begun to realize, trying to find a way to get angry. Not a few days, more like a few weeks, actually. And the reason for why is pretty simple. It's because it's the only emotion I can feel right now. The only thing that cuts through this dark void of nothing is anger. Just pure incandescent rage. Anger has been moving me to, you know, do my artwork, to keep doing videos and stuff like that. It's just sheer bloody-minded spite. Where, you know, positive motivation has otherwise failed me. And that seems to be one of my coping mechanisms. Which, in hindsight, is... Oh, yeah, that's actually... Yeah, of course that's one of my coping mechanisms. That's incredibly obvious, but something which I have not realized the extent of which is part of my personality until now. That anger is the thing that helps me get over misery. I've been very angry. On a sort of recreational level. And anger has helped. Which, you know, you wouldn't think so, but it really does help. But yeah, I was one of the casket bearers. Like, I helped carry her casket to the car that then took it away for cremation, which I believe is how she wanted to be dealt with, as it were, after her death. So that's all gone perfectly well. Anyway, I'm pissed off. I guess that's what I want to talk about in this vlog, is I want to talk about why I'm pissed off. Because I kind of don't want to talk that much about my memories, or who my grandmother was to me, or the inevitably complicated legacy she leaves behind. And it's always complicated. Every person is inherently complicated. Don't really want to talk about any of that. But I feel like I do want to talk about why I'm pissed off. If you have a religious, connection to Christianity or something like that, know that what I'm about to say is not about you, and it's not really about Christianity as a whole so much as it is about certain specific characteristics of Danish Protestant Christianity, and just my own lifelong resentment of all divine powers that do not fix my problems for me. It's a complicated thing is what I'm saying, and it's not meant to be taken personally by anyone, except me, because it is very personal to me. I was very, very angry during the ceremony. Also, bawling my eyes out, and very, very distraught, but if I had to describe my primary emotion, it was anger. It was sheer incandescent outrage. And that's partly by way of a coping mechanism, because it's easier to contain anger than it is to contain soul-killing grief. I forgot about those books. Ugh. Hey, Lola. But I do have some, what I'd say would some legitimate grievances. Once I get past these damn books. The thing that specifically about Danish Protestant Christianity, which is the state religion, is it is obsessed with propriety and ceremony and ritual and sort of handling things in a business-like manner is the way I would describe it. And so the funeral director, who was a perfectly lovely lady, who was very kind and smiled, and made sure that everybody was doing okay and that all the needs of the parishioners and the attendees were taken care of and stuff like that. At the very beginning, before even the beginning of the ceremony, she and my father and my grandmother's husband had to have an extended discussion about the order in which the flowers are laid next to the casket. Because everybody had been, as is tradition, giving flowers as to express condolences and sympathy and grief and stuff like that. Standard stuff. With which there's nothing wrong. And I remember I got very, very angry at that. Because who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? It was the pettiest, most Danish thing I have ever seen in my life. To be standing at a funeral and having an argument over whether friends or family should have their flowers closest to the casket. As though that could possibly matter worth a shit. It does not matter worth a shit. Fuck it. So long as my flower's somewhere in a half-mile vicinity of my grandmother, I don't give a shit. It was that my father, first of all, was interrupted in his grieving process by the demands of making a decision about protocol arrangements. Made me angry, and that I was because I was basically just kind of standing by the casket and looking at it and trying to collect myself a little bit and quietly talking to my grandmother in my head, trying to give her a goodbye, and This shit interrupted me. Because they needed to take a look at the flower arrangements and shit like that. And I just... The intrusion of mundanity is unconscionable. I can't... No. That's wrong. That kind of mundanity does not have a place at a goddamn funeral. I refuse it. It's just... It made me very, very, very unhappy. And, yeah. That kind of continued throughout the ceremony. I found a lot of ways to get very, very angry at organized religion in Denmark and at the ways in which Christianity phrases itself and stuff like that. And I feel like I have some legitimate grievances besides all the ones that are just me trying to avoid my internal turmoil and grief. I can't... The hymns. I could not stand the hymns at all. Hooray, bat form. I can fly. And I could not... The priest was trying to give a homily to my grandmother, which is hard because he doesn't know her. Because she wasn't, as far as I'm aware, a super devout Christian or anything. Never went to church, didn't really... She was culturally Christian, like pretty much everyone in Denmark is, but every white person anyway. But she had no strong spiritual relationship to religion or show any strong religiousness in her life. And I just... When I hear a sermon like... Again, the priest just trying to do his job. I have no ill will towards him. He's just doing what he's supposed to do. But when I heard him read from, you know, the Easter thing, Christ's resurrection, and I read the lyrics of the hymns, the supplicant bootlicking just made me so angry. Because the overriding message in those texts, as it is indeed in most Danish versions of Protestantism, is that you should be grateful to God for his protection and his love and his kindness, then that he takes care of you after death, and he maintains you, and yada, yada, yada. And, you know, God is good, and life is garbage, and you should be happy when you die, and you should be grateful when your loved ones die, because then they get to go and be with God. Which is objectively better than hanging out with you, you fucking loser. Why would they want to be there in the world with their family when they can be up there with God, who's better than you? Suffice to say, I take some issue with that. Yeah. I take some issue with that, and that was kind of how I managed to hold myself together throughout the ceremony, was just cultivating anger towards the rituals of Christianity that, intentional or not, and I'm sure it's not, tells me that I do not have the right to be angry about the way that my grandmother suffered and the way that we all suffer. That I don't have the right to find that an obscene injustice. That much like Job, raging against God for using his life as a plaything in a bet with Satan, which surely is a sort of hypocrisy, have no right to judge him because he's so big and so magic or whatever that fuck your petty human sense of morality. And that occupied my mind a lot. That anger, because you know what? You fucking killed her, God. So as far as I'm concerned, granting her pride of place at your side in heaven and showering her in resplendent gifts and gold and giving her all the happiness that can be found in the universe is the fucking least you can do. You cruel, selfish, narcissistic piece of garbage deity. If you do any less than that, I'll kill myself, I'll go to hell, and I will raise a second army against you, and I will batten down the doors of heaven. And I will demand, in very impolite terms, to speak to the manager. That was the kind of thing that I spent a lot of the funeral having going through my head, is that if God wants to claim fucking credit for all the good shit, then he has to take the blame for the bad shit, like the things that happened to my grandmother, her dementia, and the medical issues, over and over, the medical issues, and the blood clots, and the medicine she had to take that fucked up her head, and all of that. I'm very, very angry about that. And if God wasn't fictional, I would be very happy to have someone to blame for it. But yeah, that's been consuming my head a lot, because I've been stuck in a Christian church for several hours, and when you're in there, there's nothing to do but contemplate your relationship to God. Mine being entirely adversarial. That was an easy boss. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have that much more to say. I don't know if there is that much more to say. My grandmother's dead. The last thing I will ever see of her, the last thing I will ever know of her, is the weight of a casket leaving my hand as I loaded it into a car that took her away forever. And I can talk all night, believe you me, I'm restraining myself here, about the anger I have at a burial ritual, at a version of Christianity, at a version of, you know, dealing with grief that requires me to clasp my hands and say, "Thank you, sir. Could you kill another one of my relatives, please, so they can be happy?" I could talk about that all night, but that's not really, because I don't believe in God. It's like, of course there's no God. If there was a God, the world wouldn't be so shit. But what it is powerlessness and grief and infinite, endless exhaustion and sadness. Against which my only remedy is anger. It's literally it. Like, I have nothing else. I have no other emotion available to me to feel but anger. And so I keep returning to it. I keep falling back into anger. Which is understandable and in some ways rather narcissistic. I keep centering myself, you know. I keep making it about me, as it were. And the fucked up thing is, I don't think my grandmother would have minded that very much. I don't think she would have minded that at all. In fact, I think she would have been supportive of it. Because she was, to a fault, supportive. Even of things that maybe she shouldn't have been so supportive of. Like, for instance, my desire to have more cake and sugar than I probably should have when I was a kid. And she was always indulgent of my little, you know, flights of fancy, my little ideas and my demands for attention. And she would have been indulgent of this as well. She would have understood. I mean, Christ, talk about a person who knows what it's like to lose someone they care about. My uncle died when I was young, back in the 90s. He was taken by AIDS. Back before, you know, people really knew what it was, before they knew how to protect themselves from it, before they knew anything. He was one of the victims. So my grandmother and my father both had to bury, you know, a member of their family that way. My father lost his brother, my grandmother lost her son. And now my father has lost all of his remaining living family, except for his own children. His father's dead, his mother's dead, his brother's dead. As far as I'm aware, there aren't really any cousins, particularly. None that we're close with, anyway. And there's the anger again, that he has to bow his head and be grateful for that. I would just say, okay, thanks, that's great. I'll call you when I have some more relatives I want you to kill. But my father is not angry. Not that he shows, anyway. He doesn't show much emotion at all. I've copied that from him. To a point. Well, you know, as you may know from these videos and from following me on the internet, I am somewhat more of an emotional stripe, which is something I've been lucky enough to absorb from my mother. But yeah, my dad is stoic to a fault. And he was today as well. Like, he allowed himself to cry for a bit with me and my sister, which I'm very grateful for, honestly. But then the mundanity set in again, and there were arrangements to discuss, and they needed to figure out something about the catering at the thing after the funeral, where there was a buffet and like all the, you know, family members and stuff, everyone who was there got together and so he got to be sad for a few minutes. Maybe. And I'm sure he's handling his grief in private. It's just, if there's one thing I hate about Denmark, it's that obsession with decorum and with doing things in the right order and following protocol and following ritual, and because it steals away not just my opportunity to grieve, as it did when they interrupted me at the casket, but it steals it away from all of us. You can't have emotions right now. You have to wait. Because you have to take care of this mundane bullshit. Yes, I know, Ghost. I know. You have to take care of this mundane bullshit now. You have to deal with these people who need something from you. You have to put on you know, a polite face and be of service. No, you can't stand by the coffin for an extra 10 minutes to collect yourself. There's a man with a van who has to take the casket away, and he can't be asked to wait, and... Oh, the flowers need to be in the right order for who was most close to her. As if any... Like, I can't imagine what it's like to be a person who gives a shit about something like that. Who would be upset if their flowers weren't the correct distance away from the fucking coffin? If the hierarchy wasn't recognized in the flower arrangement? I don't know who would want to be that person. Who would want that to be a part of... I wouldn't. Rather die, honestly. Than become a person who goes to a funeral for someone they cared about and then gives a shit about where the flowers are. There's the anger again. Anyway, I'm gonna try and get some more sleep.